Hello, and we're live with Good Morning Lancaster. It's Wednesday the 26th of November and we're live outside the LA1 TV studio.
We've got lots coming up on today's show, including the latest news headlines.
We'll be discussing the university's plans to increase tuition fees for international and postgraduate students with LUSU President Laura Clayson.
So let's get out of the cold and into the studio. We'll see you inside.
And I'm Jessica Beard.
Now it's time for this week's news headlines. It was announced on Friday that the staff marking an assessment boycott would be suspended until January 15th, following productive negotiations between the Universities and Colleges Union and the employers, Universities UK. The boycott, which took place for 2 weeks, was in protest of the employer's decision to scrap the pension scheme in place for staff at 69 universities. The disputes are ongoing, but the UCU have decided to halt the industrial action in order to negotiate a fair solution without impeding student studies. The union said in a statement, both parties are committed to seeking a joint proposal for reform that offers an affordable, sustainable, and attractive pension scheme for both current and future members.
Wednesday of last week saw student groups rally in London as part of the Free Education demo. However, the event was marred by the arrest of 11 people during the protests, although all of them were released the next day. The demo also saw angered student attacks at the National Union of Students London headquarters. This followed the union's decision to withdraw its support for the march due to what they considered high levels of risk. Despite the NUS's withdrawal from the protest, more than 10,000 students joined the demonstrations. LUSU supported the demo, taking a coachful of students to London, whilst its education team took 333 letters of student support for free education to Parliament for Eric Ollerenshaw, MP Lancaster and Fleetwood.
Week 7's LUSU Council saw Bowdoin College President Lee Dudding bring forward an intense discussion on the efficiency and effectiveness of LUSU Council. The Council is the lead policy-making body in the union, giving the organization its political direction. However, Dudding believed that it could be improved to increase accountability, student representation, and effectiveness. He stated that some students are disengaged from LUSU Council, and the body does not often utilize the power it holds, or its ability to steer the students' union's directions.
This week, the election for JCR positions, cross-campus officers and NUS delegates take place. On Friday, the winners will be announced for all electable positions following hustings, which took place over the last few days. The 8 colleges, excluding Graduate College, which held its elections earlier this term, will decide who represents them on their JCR. This week, students will also get the opportunity to decide who represents them at this year's NUS conference. Cross-campus officers who represent students on specific issues will also be decided. Voting starts today and ends at 6 p.m. on Friday, so don't forget to vote.
And of course, today's top headline is the university's plan to increase tuition fees. The university has confirmed its plans to raise tuition fees by 5% for postgraduate and international students. In University Council on Friday, week 7, a large majority voted in support of a proposition to raise fees. The decision has been made in order to bring the university's fees in line with competing universities. As well as the increase in fees, Council also confirmed the increase of accommodation prices by 2.5% for next year. These increasing costs may well be worrying to some students, with LUSU already campaigning to reduce the cost of living. Fees for international students and postgraduate students are already considered high by many, with numerous courses already costing international students upwards of £16,000 a year. Accommodation fees will also continue to rise, despite student frustration that rent prices have been consistently increasing above the level of inflation.
We'll have the president of LUSU, Laura Clayson, in to discuss this later.
But first, we'll be looking at what happened when LA1 TV met Home Secretary Theresa May and the Mayor of Lancaster, Susie Charles.
The Home Secretary was on a farm visit showing her support for rural communities following multiple cases of sheep rustling. But we were more interested in the recent student protests. Here's our interview. In just a few moments' time, we'll be joined by the Right Honourable Theresa May, Member of Parliament for Maidenhead and Home Secretary. Hi Home Secretary, have you got any comment on the recent student protests in London?
Well, the protest took place. I'm pleased to say that the police policed them, I think, very well. Obviously, there were some issues that took place around them, and as I understand it, a number of arrests were made.
And will any measures take place in response to the protest?
Well, the protest took place. The government is obviously always looking at issues around higher education and students, but students chose to protest on the streets of London. Obviously, we recognise that people have a right to protest, a right to demonstrate. That must be done peacefully, and in this case, obviously, it went off with a number of arrests being made.
It's great to see up here in the countryside. How important do you think it is to protect the rural communities?
Well, I think rural communities are important, and it's important that we're able to look at issues that particularly affect rural communities. That's why it's been good to hear about this initiative here with the local farmers, working with the police on an issue that is of real concern to local farmers, and ensuring that there's a better response from the police as a result of the action and the cooperation between the police and local farmers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm here with Susie Charles, Mayor of Lancaster. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Cold?
Yes. How important would you say students are to Lancaster?
Very important, actually, both to the businesses in Lancaster and also, most especially, I think, to the taxes.
So they're a big impact on the community?
They are, yes, and a beneficial one. Yeah, definitely.
In what ways?
Well, beneficial because, of course, it's extra income into Lancaster, so you're helping to keep the small businesses and also maybe national businesses. They're driving their profits up and everything, so they're very welcome in Lancaster.
And finally, what's the importance of the Home Secretary coming up here today?
Well, I think it was very important for her especially, I would have thought, to learn about rural crime and to realise that there is quite a lot of rural crime about, with sheep rustling and also various other farm crime as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
We have our news writer and correspondent, Henry from Scan, in to talk with us about the headlines this morning. Henry, thanks for joining us.
So, can you run us through this demo and what happened down in London, please?
Okay, this time last week on Wednesday, there was the free education demo. A group of students, it was about 10,000 total, were down in London. I think about a coachful from Lancaster, all protesting for free education against rises in tuition fees. There were a lot of people there, and it was, I believe it was relatively successful. There seems to have been some support from it, and it got quite a lot of media representation when they were down there. It was quite a heated protest going all across London all day. But a lot of them, as I said, think it was quite successful.
It was a passionate one at that, wasn't it, with a few arrests, I think, taking place.
There was quite a lot of sort of violent sort of activity, a lot of people pulling down barriers, things like that. They put barriers all around Parliament Square, but those were quickly destroyed straight away. Although the sort of campaigning team, the groups who set it up, such as the Young Greens, they said that basically no one was particularly over the top, and those who were arrested were straight away released. The NUS had concerns beforehand about safety and whether or not this might happen, but to be honest, it looks relatively restrained as these sorts of demos go.
For that matter, some students had a violent response to the NUS withdrawal of support, didn't they? They attacked the NUS headquarters?
Yeah, the NUS headquarters, it had its window smashed in, it was sort of graffitied all over. To be honest, I'm not sure that was an appropriate response. The NUS, they seem to have relatively justifiable means not to get involved, although if they're not going to get involved, then that's fine, but you should do it in a more responsible way than egging them and smashing their windows.
And will the campaign be affected by this violence, do you think?
I doubt it. I think, to be honest, I'm not sure how well the campaign's going anyway. It's good to make some sort of protest going into the 2015 general election, but I do think it's doesn't necessarily matter how they get the sort of topic on the table. They just want to get the topic on the table.
How much involvement did Lancaster have in the demo?
We were quite involved. Unfortunately, they were only able to make the decision quite late, but they were actually planning on going because of the NUS. Although there was a coach load of people, I couldn't go myself, but a lot of people I've spoken to said it was very successful, and they were sort of involved in it. There was also a group of students, the education team from LUSU, who went down to Parliament and met with Eric Olwenshaw, the Lancaster and Fleetwood MP, and they handed him 333 student letters basically saying that people are fed up with the situation as a sort of protest moment themselves.
I mean, how important do you think it is that Lancaster does get involved in this kind of thing?
It's important. We definitely, as students, need to get this as quite a big topic. It's going to be a big topic anyway. People often think that this is the only issue students talk about, but it's definitely key to make sure politicians are thinking about it come the general election, especially MPs like Eric Olwenshaw, where they only have a small majority and therefore need the student vote.
And do you think now the relationship with the NUS will be sort of affected and impaired?
Possibly, but I think it was more damaging the initial decision by the NUS than this from the students. I think the initial decision from the NUS not to support the demo was possibly a bad one in retrospect, and I think they possibly do realise this. There's often sort of fraught relations between NUS and other student unions anyway, so I'm not sure quite how beneficial this all could have been.
And are there any indications that there'll be a sort of outcome after all this, a response to the demo?
There haven't been as of yet. A lot of politicians haven't really spoken much about it, really, and indeed, like on the BBC, it was not as well publicised as maybe they would have hoped, although it did get quite a lot of response. But students are continuing to push this issue, and I think this time next week, it's a day of free education where students are going to protest for this.
Okay, so fill us in on the JCR elections. What's going on?
This week is elections period, as I'm sure everyone who's been bombarded with people on the spine, posters, everything else will have noticed. There are 8 colleges excluding grad had theirs a couple of weeks into the term, but 8 colleges are electing their JCR teams, their JCR presidents and everyone else. CCOs and NUS delegates, they're also being elected.
So the candidates are running at the moment, and when can you start voting then?
You can start voting now.
Now?
Yeah, it's about 10 o'clock today, I think it opened up, and until Friday. I think it's about 4 o'clock-ish, I'm not entirely sure. And then they'll be announced on Friday evening.
So they've had all their husts. Do you know anything about the turnout to these?
They are usually very good, and the ones I've been to were very good. I was at Furness last night and Pendle the night before, live blogging that, and both of those were very good. Pendle went until about 1 in the morning, and it was still very good. Yeah, 7 hours of that, but it was fun, and the good occasions. Pardon me. But people really did get behind it and were very involved.
Yeah, I've had some disappointment to the turnouts at the CCO elections and LUSU council elections. What have you heard about that?
Yeah, the CCO elections, I heard that pretty much everyone there was up for nomination, which is sometimes the case with these sorts of things, but it doesn't necessarily reflect voter turnout. Okay. Hopefully, in spite of there not being that many people there for the actual hustings, we will still get people voting and still making the important decisions.
A lot of the candidates weren't there themselves and sent in either, some speeches or nothing. How do you think this reflects on the candidates that are standing this year?
Hopefully it'll have some sort of impact, because obviously if they physically can't be there for whatever reason, then that shouldn't damage them. But if they choose not to be there, then that should have some sort of effect, because it shows possibly a lack of commitment to the role. But in respect of that, there not being that many people there at the hustings, I'm not sure it'll have that big be that big an issue.
Like you said, we've been seeing a lot of campaigning. What constitutes a good campaign?
I'm no campaigning expert, but often going above and beyond the usual Facebook page and poster is the right thing to do. This year, to be honest, I haven't seen that many different things. I remember a couple of years ago, when milking was a thing, I don't know if anyone saw this, someone got a lot of response by just pouring milk over their heads in a video. Something, thinking out of a box and doing something slightly different. But to be honest, mainly seeing just traditional posters, but also a lot of bed sheets with people's names written and stuff like that.
So that's the way to run it, is it? How important would you say it is for students to get involved in either voting or even standing as a candidate?
Yeah, well, your JCRs are important. Everyone is in a college and everyone knows the role it plays. Some people get more involved, some people get less involved, but whatever position you're in, the colleges do need some support and do need student involvement. Student interaction between the college JCRs and themselves can often sort of leave a lot to be desired, so they definitely want to get as many people getting their voice heard and choosing how their JCR is run as possible.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll shortly be discussing the proposal to increase tuition fees with Laura Clayton, the president of LUSU, and Justin Chow, international CCO.
Recently, Lancaster University have voted to increase the rent payments for students by 2.5%, whilst international students and postgraduate students' tuition fees have gone up by a whopping 5%. The Conservative government have recently clamped down on the amount of international student visas that they're issuing. This, in combination with the increased international students' tuition fees, means that Lancaster University is more than likely going to see a reduction in the amount of international students applying for next year. For example, for an international student studying biomedicine, they're going to need to pay £17,452 after these fees increase. That means that someone's going to need to foot the £52,000 bill at the end of their degree. Lancaster University are in partnership with the UPP, which is the University Partnership Programme. They've stated that the UPP will be in charge of 2/3 of the university accommodation for the next 48 years. They've also altered this accommodation in 2008 to mean that the university accommodation prices will increase by 1.5% above inflation year on year. Lancaster University's standard student rooms have increased by £31.85 in the past 6 years, which is a massive 46% increase. SCAN have recently completed a student survey which has found that not a single student interviewed were happy with the accommodation price.
Right, thank you for joining us, guys.
Thanks, guys. So tell me, what is your opinion on this proposal? What is it going to mean for students?
Well, I'm completely against this proposal, and I have stated this in the 3 meetings that I've been in where it's been discussed. I've also sent separate emails and organised meetings with different members of management to kind of talk to them about my concerns, because, we have like these wonderful widening participation targets and we exceed them every year, but I think the increase in postgraduate fees, for example, for home EU students especially, there's no safety net there for students. Like, you can't get postgraduate funding like you do at undergraduate level. So I know a lot of postgraduates that are, for example, working 3 jobs to support themselves already, and I think like the massive increase that doesn't seem that massive necessarily on paper, but I think the reality of the increase once we actually get into the year is going to hit students quite hard.
But are there already proposed systems and structures to help these struggling students?
Well, there have been discussions about working groups being set up to look into bursaries and scholarships for postgraduates, and there's also talk about country-specific scholarships as well. But for me, I see that more as like damage control. That's kind of like contingency. I think that there's absolutely no need for this university to increase their fees. We make a massive surplus every year. They haven't actually said what this money is going to go into, apart from the fact that it's supposedly going to make us more of a competition for our competitor institutions.
Yeah,
and I feel that's a completely like market-driven thing, and we should be focused on students.
But surely, if you look at getting the same level as other universities that are close to us, then that's a competent argument for that. And from an economic point of view, surely it's profit maximisation. You've got to remember that it's a private institution, Is it not sort of normal that you'd see this reaction from a university?
Well, actually, I'm going to have to disagree with you there, because we're not a private institution, we're a charity, and we're meant for the public good. We're supposed to be there to educate people and advance knowledge and wisdom and understanding. And if you up fees like by this much, I would argue that we're going completely against our mission statement. So we're not private. We act very much in a neoliberal context, which makes me really sad. But I just think that it's completely nonsensical, especially with falling recruitment levels. I mean, we had a 9% decline in international students applying last year. We have courses where, like, postgraduates from the Home EU section are like, there's like 4 students on one of the courses, and then like 150 overseas students. Like, so there's like such an imbalance. So it just shows that the lack of funding in this country for postgraduate students is like massively problematic.
I mean, you were at this meeting then. Was it last Friday?
Yes.
And it was yourself and Colin Mang, am I right, representing the students?
Yeah.
Now, what were your voices heard? Were they listening to you? How did it work?
Well, basically, because I'd brought up my concerns when I first saw the paper at the University Management Advisory Group, and then I brought it up again at a subcommittee of University Council, which is the Finance and General Purposes Committee. And then I'd sent emails, like I said, and spoke to different members of management, and I just basically hadn't been listened to. And obviously, my way of approaching it to do with widening participation and just like the fact that students aren't going to be able to afford to come here, and like recruitment's going to be massively affected, I decided not to go with that argument. And Colin made the argument that he thought faculties and departments should be consulted and it should go to Senate. And basically we had a vote, and there were a few people that voted with us, but pretty much everyone.
Going back to the whole Students' Union, how does this reflect on the relationship between the Students' Union and the university? I mean, do you have much of a say then if they're not listening to what you're trying to put out there?
The thing is, I believe, like, as the student representative, like, that sat in on these initial meetings, I felt like I had a say, and I felt like they did hear me, but they didn't listen to me. And I don't feel like I'm coming from a very strong position of power, because I made some like really strong arguments.
Got the highest position of power that any student could have.
But if you're in a minority of one student and everyone else sat around that table are either in management or lay council members, like, you've got no power. You haven't got a position of power in that situation.
But how does that reflect on the university? How does that show that we actually have got very little say as students?
Well, I think it completely reflects the fact that the university...
I mean, you've got to do something about this. Surely, for the students, on behalf of them, what are you going to do?
Well, I really, like, I've tried, like, so hard so far, and I know, like, everyone, all the other full-time officers are really working hard on this too, and obviously we've got the general meeting coming up on Thursday, and we're just going to be fighting on it. Me and Colin are hopefully going to be writing a paper that we're going to take to University Council in January about why we think that this really isn't going to be good for the institution, and that, like that board of governors of the university, they should be acting in the interest of students, because what's good for students is good for the institution, and I think that they've completely not done that, and they've done it in the interest of profit. So
couldn't you think that maybe this will level out in a higher quality of teaching or sort of facilities and environment, learning environment?
Well, there obviously is that potential, but I mean, if you haven't recruited the students to come here and appreciate that and embrace the options and opportunities that are here, then I think you can invest as much as you want into like the estates of the university and stuff, but academics are still having massive problems with their pensions. There was all the big pay dispute last year. Like maybe the university needs to start looking into how they treat their staff and actually use the money.
Yeah, but maybe they can do that with the money that's coming in. So maybe they've got to scale down. This, is just an opinion to throw out there. They might have to scale down and have maybe fewer international students, but then, with a better level, then they can start again and build up. Is that not maybe a viewpoint that they might have?
I don't know. The only viewpoint I've heard said,
I know.
I know. I mean, I can see where you're coming from, but I really don't think that's the reason that they've taken this decision. They haven't taken this decision to improve teaching or anything like that. All it says in the papers is to bring us in line with our competitor institutions.
So you don't think we'll see a rise in the quality of teaching?
Well, I think the quality of teaching is already quite good at this institution. I mean, we wouldn't be in the top 10 if we didn't have good academics. So I would argue that actually that's kind of a bit of
Can't they respond to these recent sort of marking boycotts that the lecturers have been doing? Can't they respond to this with the money that they'll be getting in?
Yeah, but that is not what's happened historically, is it? Last year we made like a massive surplus of like 16.2 million or whatever it was. I'm pretty sure that's the right statistic. And did that go into the teachers? That go into the lecturers? You know, it didn't, did it?
No.
They got a 1% increase. That's all they got.
Yeah, I think that's what, Justin, you're cross-campus officer for international students. Now, you must be really, you know, involved in this whole situation. How do you think it'll impact international students?
I just don't even, I can't even. It's just, a lot of our students are international students. Look at our postgrads, 40% of grad college are actually international students. And if you just look at that statistics and the amount of fees they're going to put up, first of all, international students don't have fixed fees already. And on top of that, if you're increasing fees, we're going to reduce the amount of international students coming to our university. And if you look at the statistics and the amount of international students we have on campus, it's actually a lot more than we realise. And what they bring to the university and what they bring to student life in a local student is amazing. And if we actually let that drop, it's going to have a massive impact on us as a university, and also, not to mention, you know, decline in ranking as well. So it's just going to be absolutely awful if they actually let this happen. And too much opinion.
Yeah, I mean, something I'd also like to add in here is the fact that there are a few students from overseas that are studying medicine, and they are already in their course of study, and the university is now going to sit them down and say, oh, you know, we're now going to be increasing your fees by about 11%.
Yeah.
During their time of studying here. What if you couldn't afford to do that? You've completely just wasted all that money. I think it's completely ridiculous. I don't think the university has at all thought about it.
I mean, here we've got that there'll be an increase of £300 a term for some overseas students. So
I mean, some people just can't afford that. It's a privilege for people to come here and study at Lancaster University, and we can't always expect them to have just, you know, money just don't grow on tree, you know, you can't just expect them to like, yeah, I've got so much money to spend. You just can't expect that from students. And I think just increasing £300 can be a lot of stress on a lot of students, and that's just absolutely ridiculous for some students to actually, you can't expect them to pay that. Because when you pay that, it's £900 like a whole year, it's not right, it's just not right.
So we can expect to see a big collaboration, can we, between the two of you and a sort of response to the university?
Yeah, I mean, there's the general meeting on Thursday, there's probably going to be an action after the general meeting, and then next Wednesday is the National Day of Action for Free Education, which is kind of following on from the demonstration that was in London last week. Yeah. And there's going to be a big demonstration in the square, and hopefully there's some other unions coming up to support us as well, so that's quite good. There's a lot of support going around. I've had lots of solidarity messages, because Keele, for example, they had a 54% increase in their postgraduate fees last year.
That was an enormous amount.
I mean, this is something that's affecting like universities across the UK.
Things must be done. So can you tell us about this general meeting then, and what the importance of people turning up, like how important it is for people to actually go and express their opinion and, you know, solidarity?
Well, it's the kind of situation where you can go and you can have your voice heard, like in like a more public forum. Obviously, you can come and talk to the union anytime. You can come along to Union Council, but I mean, this is a place where we can pass policy against fees that will give us a massive mandate to like be working on that continuously. And like it's, you know, we like talking to students and hearing their opinion on stuff, and to get everyone in a big room together, I think it just makes you feel like you're being so much more of a student representative, and there's actually some democracy, which I would argue is the complete antithesis of what the university are doing in respect to this, because they're not really listening to
I mean, there's a clear
everyone.
problem. Do you think realistically they will listen at the end of the day?
Well, I feel like I'm optimistic, but at the same time, I'm trying to be realistic. Like, I think that if we resist enough as students and build enough of a power base to really challenge this decision, then the university will have to rethink what they're doing. I really, really do. But it requires students to be really, really active and like to start mobilising and questioning the university and bombarding the Vice-Chancellor with emails and protesting and coming to the general meeting and getting your voice heard. Like, we got to fight this, but we got to fight it all together. You know, it's not enough for me to sit in meetings and say things. You know, there's got to be everyone shouting about it. Otherwise, like, you're just one voice and it's not enough.
Justin, are you going to be trying to contact some international students? Are you going to be appealing to them?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I'm in the middle of trying to set up a International Student Association, so that would give us a bit more of an open forum for international students to have their say, to raise issues and deal with them, such as, you know, the fees. And so hopefully that could be a really useful tool for us to actually address issues within, you know, just the fees or immigration or anything that international students actually have to face. There's a lot of problems they already have that are not being dealt with, and this, you know, should be the least of the concern, but actually the university's not helping us at all.
Oh, well, a lot of hard work to come by the sounds of it.
Yes.
Well, thanks so much for speaking with us. Good luck with the general meeting tomorrow.
Thanks. Are you going to be there?
Yes.
Yay!
See you there.
Just remind me time and place.
6 p.m. in Faraday.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Please come.
Well, that's all we have time for today. We'll be back at the same time as next week. And thanks for watching Good Morning Lancaster.
Thank you for watching, and we hope to catch you on LA1 TV. Bye.
Bye.